Welcome to The Passion Pod with your host, Chris Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the feature presentation.
Season 3, Episode 5.
Welcome back, friends, for our oddest episode so far. Today I walked about a block and a half, I don't know if it's considered even 2 blocks, down to Odd Humyns to speak with the owner, Serena. Welcome.
Thank you. Awesome to be here.
Yeah, I mean, it's in your own store, so I would hope that you're excited about being here.
Yeah.
It's one of the nice things is being able to just bring equipment with. I mean, it's not quite as professional as it could be, but at the same time, I don't have to ask people to come into like some random studio somewhere. I can kind of just go and do my thing. Mm-hmm. And doing them back to back, like I just did one last night with the people like 4 or 5 stores away at Hello Adorn, and then right here, and I parked at my shop to walk here. It's like kind of cool being in our own little zone here.
It totally is.
Especially this like on this side of the river. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, this is like kind of the cool, trendy area.
Yeah.
Which is rad because it wasn't, 5-6 years ago or whatever.
Right.
Now it's the cool spot. So can you tell a little bit like who you are, your whole little summarized story, I guess?
Yeah. I'm Serena. I born and raised here. I went to college here, and then after college, I got a job working at Volume 1 as a graphic designer. And then I also started a band. I'm in a band called Sniffle Party. So that's been kind of fun. And then after Volume 1, I left to do my own thing with my former business partner. That was just doing design, like graphic design, illustration, branding, that kind of stuff. And then we just kind of wanted to expand. So we opened Odd Humyns in the winter of 2018, and at that point we were just selling art supplies. But then we wanted to kind of expand because I'm gay as hell, and I feel like downtown specifically, just like it's very white and it's very straight, and we just kind of wanted to bring more voices to the table, and like high school me wanted to see something like this, so now we're trying to do that. So yeah,
sure.
In a nutshell.
So you basically are trying to build like a community, like hub type place.
Absolutely.
Okay, because that's like where skateboarding comes in. It's not about like the products that you sell necessarily. Obviously, you have products for sale, and you carry I carry skater-owned products, so that way you want to buy stuff from them and whatever. But it's more about having kind of like that safe space for everybody to kind of meet and talk about whatever. Either it's like throwing events or whatever. Just having that place where people can kind of identify as like that's my spot.
Yep.
Cool.
Totally. It's definitely about community. And like with our basement venue, the Salon, like we were bringing in a lot of acts that like you wouldn't normally see in Eau Claire, and different voices. And it's just nice to start having that community start to build on its own even. So yeah, very much tied.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, obviously, with COVID and stuff right now, which we were just talking about off mic, that's made things difficult. But I think in general, there's so few legitimate venues, Like, there's obviously, like, house venues and stuff, which is tight. But, like, to actually have a business where there's a venue for people to play, there's really not a whole lot of options in Eau Claire, which is kind of weird considering how awesome our music scene is.
Yeah.
It's pretty diverse, right? Like, we got a lot of, like, people that play metal. There's obviously a bunch of hip-hop.
Totally.
Like, I interviewed Nalia the other day, and she's, like, R&B. And there's like electronica and shit and all kinds of stuff. So it's kind of hard when you only have like the Plus.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
Which the Plus is killing it. They have shows constantly. So like they've been a huge part of the scene. So it's cool when you see an opportunity like that where it's like, well, okay, there's definitely a need for these people to like come together and have something. And it's cool to be able to open something for that. Because I think like honestly, I've brought up quite a few times to people that, I've talked to you or I've come through here, and everyone always asks me, like, well, what is that place?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, it's cool. I thought it was an art store initially, which obviously, like, it was a little bit. Yeah. But then, like, every time I come in, I'm like, it's just like this cool, like, little gift shop kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yep.
Is it a lot of local artists, then, that do the stuff you sell? Or where do you get your stuff from?
Not particularly. A lot of the stuff that we carry are from artists that I've followed in the past. And I would feel comfortable saying like around 60% or more are people who are queer or of color or just from different backgrounds. So it's also like trying to bring in products and support those communities as well, not just like our local ones, because we have places in town that sell things from local people, and that's beautifully and wonderful. But it's also important to like think about who you're stocking and where that product is coming from, so that you're kind of distributing the money as it should be. So
yeah, I think it's really important too to like figure out where your niche is.
Yep.
Because if you're just carrying stuff that is kind of for everybody, then nobody cares.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you kind of have to be something unique, especially in a town like the size of Eau Claire. You can't really have a bunch of stores that are the local store, right? Like Volume 1 obviously kind of has that on lock, and then you have Tangled Up in Hue that is like the more artist, featured type thing, but it's also relatively similar as far as like their message.
Yep.
But if like we don't have a queer community, we have a queer community, but if we don't really have like any kind of leadership in it or like a space like that, then it makes sense to have a niche like that. It's the same way with skateboarding, right? Where like there isn't a core shop outside of mine. There wasn't before I opened it. So I don't need to try to like carry rollerblades and bikes or anything. It's just we need a skateboard specific shop. Nobody did it. I was ready to do one, did it, and now it's been there for 6 years or whatever. So it's been doing really well.
Yeah, and that's like also just like a larger conversation about like finding your place, and also as Eau Claire continues to grow, these spaces are going to be integral to that growth, like providing the groundwork for the skateboarding community, or providing the groundwork for queer or folks makers of color. That's also a huge part of the conversation on top of shopping local. So it's all important,
Yeah.
But it's just a part of the larger puzzle as Eau Claire starts to grow.
Sure. Well, it's cool to see like entrepreneurship becoming trendy in a way, because it has been, right? They're teaching it more in schools and all that type of stuff. Well, for the longest time, you just wanted to fit in, or a lot of people just wanted to fit in, which was fine. But you can't fit in and then also be a leader for anybody, right? Like you kind of have to find whatever it is that you are, because there's probably a lot of other people that are like you and they don't want to stand up, and be that. And especially in a community like the queer community, where there's so many like barriers that you kind of face with like just the average American or whatever within the culture, you know what I mean? Versus like me as a white male, I don't really have that.
Right.
I can kind of just open something and people go, oh, well, like almost all of downtown Eau Claire is owned by different white males. So to be able to come in as a female business owner, but then also a queer one, it kind of puts all these different barriers. But by you overcoming that and opening it, it really sets the example and shows everybody that like that has nothing to do with opening the business. Anyone can do that. That shouldn't be a barrier. It was, but it shouldn't be. And it kind of like I said, kind of breaks those doors open for hopefully other people to, whether they're queer or whatever, but who have other barriers, to see people like that doing it and go, okay, well then if they could do it, then I could probably do that type of thing as well. Which I was actually just talking to Kyle Lehman yesterday. He's a good friend of mine. He was on the show in season 1 about how he was working for Decky and trying to do like this video project, focusing on diversity within downtown. And it is kind of crazy that we really don't have a whole lot of it in Eau Claire. I mean, in general, Eau Claire is like predominantly white, but even just like female business owners, there's really not like, it really is white male dominated as far as the business owners in downtown at this point. And it'd be really cool to see like more of that stuff grow, which is part of the reason it's cool to see what Becca's done over at Reds, as far as like bringing women together with the Red Letter Grant and all that stuff, just to try to like promote, women realizing that, hey, you're just as capable as males are, just because like some parts of society are putting these barriers up doesn't mean they have to be barriers. Like you're just as capable as anyone else.
And that's with Eau Claire in general too. There is so much opportunity to do your own thing here. And not everybody can, and not everybody should, but if you're capable, and you kind of have the know-how or the help, like we got one of the first Red Letter Grants in 2016 or something. But there's so much room to create your own thing, and there's so much room to like create opportunities for other creatives or artists or skateboarders. Like there's so much room to like fill your niche, fill your thing, and then like run with it. Whereas like if you go to Minneapolis or another larger city, you're just a small fish in a big pond. And like that's also valid too. I'm not dissing that at all. But here you definitely have more of a say, I guess, if you have a business or something. Like you can really do your own thing here, and that's a really cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah, the anonymity, if I'm saying that word, is very different in this type of city. We're in kind of like a little sweet spot where, we're not the size of town of like Menominee or whatever, where it's really hard to have niche businesses because there just isn't a whole lot of community. So you'd have to sell a ton online to exist.
Right.
We have enough of a population where you can be something pretty specific and still like make a living. I mean, honestly, like looking around at some of the businesses that exist, right? Like something like this, no offense to you by any means, but like this is super niche. Like how many queer graphic design artist type people specifically want to come in and buy this type of merchandise?
Yep.
And the truth of the matter is it's not about that specifically, because you can make money in all kinds of different ways, right? Like you said, you do graphic design, so certainly you can just keep doing graphic design out of here, and that can be your main income, during times where things aren't working or whatever.
Right.
But the fact that this type of thing can exist at all is pretty sweet, because in a lot of smaller towns it can't. Versus, again, in a big city, like you almost have to have a name attached to yourself to do anything.
Like selling your own brand.
Because otherwise I feel like people don't want to buy into it. You don't have enough clout, versus here you don't have to have any. If you open a store, all of a sudden you have clout.
Yeah.
Like I opened the skateboard shop, and like I was skating in this town forever, but still, once I opened the skateboard shop, it was like immediately, oh, you're the skateboard dude in this town. It's like, dude, all I did was open this store.
Right.
Like,
and it ties into that whole idea where like people will, if you create something that you believe in and are passionate about, people will follow. Yeah. And in a small town, when I mean, Eau Claire is growing, blah, blah, blah. But when there's not a lot of these outlets for folks like us, or for folks who are just looking for something different, having a place like this is like huge. And like people will absolutely show up. And that's been the most like, that's been the coolest thing, is just to see how many people have like supported what we're doing. And I had no idea. Like I didn't know what the reception would be at all. But we just did it, unapologetically, and people came. And much like the skateboard shop, like growing that community didn't really take much. It just took putting ourselves out there and a little bit of work up front.
Well, I think a lot of people would be surprised by like how much of the community is out there that just wants whatever you want to create.
Totally.
Because it's not like you talked one-on-one with every person in Eau Claire and said, hey, if I open this, would you support it? But there's a lot of people that were sitting in their houses probably wishing that something like this existed. So obviously before you invest in like opening a store or something, you need to spend a little bit of time, thinking like, okay, is this like really going to fit? Right. Like when we were growing up, because we're about the same age, remember all the kids that rode like rollerblades? Like rollerblading is like not a thing now. You know what I mean? As much as like I'm sure there's dudes out there that are still doing it, and women, whatever. Yeah. But if somebody wanted to open like a trick rollerblading shop, it's probably not going to work. But
also like it might. I have no idea. Like this town, who's to say? But like, starting to see more of these specific spots pop up and letting those personalities who are behind it show. It's like. People are ready for more conversation. People are ready for different voices and opinions, and I think Eau Claire is a very good hub to get something like that off the ground.
Yeah, a lot of it came from Volume 1. Like a lot of people feel one way or another about whatever. But truth of the matter is, like as we were growing up, as Volume 1 all of a sudden became a thing, we saw that transition of downtown not existing to now downtown is the cool place. No one really wants to be outside of downtown unless you want like a massive storefront, But in general, like small business doesn't want to be in the mall anymore. Like no one wants to be out there. Everyone wants to be a part of downtown culture. And as Volume 1 really kind of like led the way on that. Now there's a whole bunch of leaders and people involved to like make stuff. It's not just them anymore. But this area is going to continue to grow more and more and more. And really that is kind of unique to Eau Claire more than most cities this like size, which is funny because again, 15 years ago, like no one would have thought anything of Eau Claire being like a front runner in, any of this type of stuff. And now all of a sudden, like we're kind of like the cool hip city, in our whole zone, more so than any other city our size in Wisconsin that I can think of anyways. Totally. So music, what is Sniffle Party? Like I feel like I follow them on Instagram or something. But like what is the music again? Explain that to me.
I like to say dreamy witch pop. So it's kind of like ethereal, but it is like still electronic at its heart. So I would just put it in electronic.
Okay.
Genre.
What do you do? What's your role in?
I am the singer for that project, and then my bandmate is Eric Christensen, and he does all of the mixing and playing.
He writes for Volume 1, right? And he does stand up.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
I saw him outside, like, smoking a cigarette one day, and
Yeah.
I was like, yo, tell me a joke. And he's like, nah.
Yeah, that's about right.
And I was like, oh, man, I hope I didn't just piss you off.
No.
So that song was pretty fantastic. I never really listened. I mean, I did legitimately, I think, one time go on YouTube, Sniffle Party, play while I was, like, at my shop, and I don't think I paid a ton of attention.
It's usually a lot of Jeff McCabe videos.
Yeah,
That pop up.
I need to learn music so much better because I really enjoy listening to music, and I pay for stupid YouTube Premium to get rid of the ads, and I just, like, play music all day long at my store. But really, like, I don't pay much attention. So I don't know any lyrics. I don't know half of who I'm listening to.
I never really pay attention to lyrics. I mean, I do, or like bands, but a lot of it's just feeling, like, which is probably bad to admit, but a lot, yeah, I'm like the worst with names and lyrics and everything.
Okay, so let's talk inspiration. For me, where my initial inspiration came from my store was there was a skateboard shop in town a long time ago called Underloud, which was actually like a few stores away from here. It was on Barstow. So when I was growing up, I discovered that spot when I was like 14 or something, and I was the annoying little shop kid that was there all the time, would like take the garbage out in exchange for stickers and shit. I was always there, and I thought those dudes were like the coolest people that ever existed at the time. So when I grew up, that was something that was like, oh, I want to like, we need to have something like that for skateboarders to be able to go to. And yes, again, they will buy stuff and money has to like be spent. However, the point, was like I hung out on the couch and watched skate videos.
Yeah.
And like it just like provided me that hub. So that was kind of the inspiration. And in general, all skateboard shops, like real ones, are kind of similar as far as that goes. Where did the inspiration for you kind of come to transition into being like an entrepreneur and opening an actual storefront come from?
That is a good question. When I was in high school, I did a bunch of junior achievement classes, but they were all for entrepreneurship. And then in college, I wanted to minor in it, but my major was a comprehensive art major, and I didn't have enough time to take all the credits needed. But the drive to always do my own thing has been there. But coming from like an art background, we don't have an independent art supply shop. And not that Michael's or anything is bad, but also like if you go to Mike's in Menominee, it's beautiful and they have everything you could ever need. And I remember driving there in college and just being totally enamored with how he ran everything and the supplies that he stocked, and just creating community around art was really cool to see. And so I wanted to do that here, and then just expanding on that, like using my own skills, my own design skills or art or whatever, to just bring more content or bring more like voices or more messages to the table was something that I wanted to do for a long time. But people like Becca, even Tangled Up in Hue when I was in high school, that was like the cool place to be. And it was like that downtown really wasn't much then. And so picking this spot, even to be downtown, was like, wow, this feels really right. This feels like where I should be, this feels like the part of town that, just sits right, So inspiration-wise, it was a little bit of what was already happening downtown, but what I also saw from different cities. I lived in Brooklyn for a hot minute for an internship, and I remember just walking down the streets and seeing all of these like amazing, again, niche shops, and I'm like, why can't we have that here? And no one's saying no, right? And I guess you ask for forgiveness, not permission. So we started doing a lot of this stuff before we even opened the shop. Like we had a little Etsy store online, and we were also doing a lot of activist work. Like we helped plan the Women's March and things like that. So it was like a lot of these different things coming together, converging into one idea that is now what we're sitting in today.
I like that you brought up the ask for forgiveness thing, because that's one thing in entrepreneurship that like a lot of younger people specifically, right? Like you're realistically still pretty young to be owning a business,
Totally.
right? A lot of younger people don't have that like validation yet within their own careers. They don't
Or their
have
own
that
selves.
much. Yeah, they don't have that much trust in themselves to make a decision and like take a risk
Yep.
that they don't haven't seen somebody else do yet.
Yep.
Right? Which is, again, like part of, by you opening this type of store, it wouldn't open people's minds to
Right.
doing that type of thing. But if you want to do something special in business, you can't really just like wait until it's really obvious to do something.
Because it never will be.
Right.
It never will be obvious, or it never will be right.
Yeah, and people won't care
Yep.
if it's obvious. At that point, you're kind of too late. You have
Yep.
to like eventually get good at like identifying when an opportunity is gonna hit,
Yep.
and then be ready to like take the risk
Yeah.
on it. And you're not gonna make it on every single one of them anyways.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just have to be willing to take that. So
Yeah.
I've always liked that attitude in general of like, you know, so for one example of that, right? When I've had my store for a long time. Before I even opened, like my building was like looked like a brown house, and now it looks like a yellow house, which is fine. But I was like, well, okay, I got to do something so people know this is even a store.
Right.
And so I asked my landlord, like, hey, can I paint the shutters green? And they then wanted me to give them a paint swatch and like all this stuff for me to do it. And it took like 2 weeks, and they're like, yeah, you can do it. And I quickly figured out like, I'm not going to ask you guys for anything anymore. And I don't like hate my landlords. They've actually been cool during this whole time frame. But in general, it was like, I could probably just do whatever I want,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
As long
you're
as
right.
like I'm in a position to just like fix it or put it back to
Yeah.
normal afterwards. And now my shop looks wild.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It
And,
literally looks wild on the inside.
it's like a little rainforest type thing. Yeah.
But that's an interesting thing too that you bring up, because I forget what the percentage is of businesses who actually own their buildings, but it's negligible. It's nothing. The amount of business owners who don't own their buildings, and you lose a lot of independence with that. I have wanted to put a mural on this side of the building for as long as we've been here. But again, there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through to do that. Had I owned the building, it would have been up there like yesterday. So like that's an interesting point to think about, is ownership of buildings.
Yeah, I mean, that is one unfortunate thing of Eau Claire, and I don't really care if I make anyone mad about it. There's very few people that own a lot of downtown Eau
Right,
Claire,
right.
and you know who you are. If you do listen to this, you should donate significantly more to the community. I really don't appreciate how much energy is put on by, like, especially during like the BLM movement. I've had a lot of people reach out and be like, when is Passion going to make a significant donation? It's like, well, you know, all the tiny little shops like us, we've been put in a really difficult spot during COVID
Right.
of like trying to weather the storm.
Yep.
And we're not really in the position to make big moves like that.
But you know who is.
I know who is, and everyone knows
Right,
who is.
right.
And what would be really cool, even if money's not being donated, just because you own the building, it really shouldn't be up to you to dictate what Eau Claire has.
Right,
And I would
right.
love to see those people be a little bit more open. Not saying they all
Absolutely.
aren't, but I would love to see them be a little bit more open to let people be creative, because you're not the first business owner that's talked to me.
Oh,
like
yeah.
we were gonna do one in my parking lot. I don't own the building next to me, but the big brick wall
Yep.
when you go into my parking lot, that's Brooke's building. And she was told no to
Right.
put like a big
Yep.
BLM mural
I
there.
remember. I just had that conversation.
Right, which is
with
really
her.
unfortunate, because I've talked to the city about it, and we can actually just do that. Like,
Yeah.
we don't need a permit. You
Yeah.
can just put anything. As long as there's no sales pitch and there's
Right,
no business name
right.
attached, if it's just creative, you can just do that.
But
Well,
again, if you ask, they're
right.
going to tell you no.
well, yeah, but like I said, the city's okay with it. It comes down to the people that own the buildings
Right,
not being okay
right.
with it, which is really unfortunate that they have that power. But realistically, that is one really negative thing about Eau Claire. There's only a few people that own everything.
Yep.
And they have continued to purchase every
Yep.
building as it's opened up, because, you know, I've talked to other people that have tried to purchase buildings as well. Same as me, I've tried to purchase mine. These people don't want to like give up, you know what I
Right.
mean? Their ownership of all
Well,
these
for
buildings.
them, it's, and this is, I mean, I guess a grander conversation about landlords in general, but that's, instead of looking at that as a benefit to them, they look at that as income, and in a way a benefit, but not a benefit to the community. And again, I'm not speaking for all landlords or anything like that, but it is giving autonomy to small business owners to be able to own the space, or even like home ownership in downtown is interesting as well, on that same train of thought. But if you're a small business owner and you're, you know, in a stronghold on rent, or like, you know, things like that, like, you will get burned. I know people who have gotten burned by not like paying attention to the lease, or foregoing small language, you know, like, it's a really hard thing to be in the middle of. while also trying to,
I also think though, like we also need to remember as small business owners that if we're paying, if we're paying cash for our lease spaces or whatever, but in general, like if we're paying consistently and we've been there for a while, your landlord doesn't have as much control over you as you think.
Right.
Because they take a huge hit if all of a sudden you're like, cool, you don't want me here, then I'll leave. Realistically, I know if all of a sudden my landlords were like, nah, I'm over it. Okay, cool. I could just go get a different space downtown. I'm not that concerned about it. My business is established.
Right.
Otherwise, I would stay there, And because I've been there for a long period of time and done things right, my landlords actually work with me now quite a bit. A lot more than like initially, which is pretty cool. My building itself, I can't really do a mural because it has like vinyl siding.
Yeah.
So it's like not real possible to paint a mural on. So I haven't like really pushed that one. Yeah. But yeah, it would be cool. I would really like, especially because we've been seeing these murals and stuff pop up.
Yeah.
It would be really cool if some of the people that own these buildings were a little bit more open to letting that happen. Because realistically, how hard would it be to just paint right over it again?
Right.
It wouldn't be difficult at all. Right. So it would be cool if people were a little bit more open to that. Okay, so let's talk collaborations. Because I, at this point in my life, for some reason, I just love doing that shit. Which obviously, the podcast itself is just a big collaboration with all the different people. But I love doing that because I'm so used to just being in my zone of creating my own things. And it's so cool when, my candle came out. I was like, what? I can design a candle? I guess why not? That's fucking cool. Yeah. So I've done collabs with a lot of different people. Have you worked with any other businesses or individuals to collaborate on projects? And what were those?
Well, design in general is just always collaboration. So if you drive downtown, we did the Well branding, we did Shift, we did Locavore when that was a thing. We've done album artwork for a bunch of them Coolie Boys, Humber, Jerica is coming out. So we've done a lot of design work for businesses, and in that way, it's always an awesome collaboration because not only are you getting to learn about other people's passions or what other people are doing, but you also get to help them bring that to life. But other collaborations that we've done, we work with Gijig Design Co. She makes some earrings, and I think she sells them kind of other places around town, but she makes special ones for us. And she's just an amazing indigenous bead worker and artist in general. We've also worked with Reds to do some of their merch. Yeah, I guess there's more than I thought. I'm just trying to think of them all in my head. But regardless, design in general, we always work with other people. I did a lot of work, even branding events for the Black Lives Matter movement in Eau Claire. And it's such a small piece of the puzzle, but it's one that I can do and one that I can give, and that's always just really, really cool thing to do.
I think that's one thing super important is to recognize where your skill set is and just be real about it. And understand you're not capable of doing everything, but you're probably better than 99% of people at something.
Yeah.
And whatever that thing is, then recognizing, okay, well, how can I use that to help other people or how can I use that to work with other people, right? So even the podcast. I know a lot of people in Eau Claire because I'm a townie here. I'm used to talking on a mic, and I have no problems with it. And I've been told I have a relatively good radio voice, which is nice. And because I'm already an entrepreneur in town and part of the downtown culture, I'm part of that 1% of Eau Claire that actually would make sense to talk about this stuff with people. So it's wait, I'm in a position where realistically, I don't want to look at it as advertising by any means, but this turns into an hour-long advertisement for your downtown business that doesn't cost anyone any money.
Right.
It's pretty rad that I get to do that with like-minded people throughout the whole city. Yeah. And then in return, all of a sudden they're trying to have me be at all their little events and stuff. And it ends up being really cool.
Well, that's a very Midwestern ideal too. It's just I feel like Midwesterners are very good at supporting the whole. And maybe that's a lot of it stemming from Scandinavian heritage of not, boasting yourself, but that way in collaboration is really cool to kind of elevate everybody so that we all grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we're going to do some kind of collab at some point. We'll just figure out whatever that is. It'll be cool. Which by the way, this is unrelated, but I brought you a bunch of my little stickers that I made.
So
did you see these ones I posted?
Oh wait, I saw
the little holographic one.
Yeah. Okay, I don't have that one. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so we're going to do a collab at some point for sure. So besides doing a collaboration with me, who is somebody in town, either a person, a musician, or a business that would be really cool to collaborate with?
From like a design perspective, it would be really cool to collaborate with Nalia. I've like been fangirling over her for a while, and we did book a show with her in TYB in the Salon before everything closed. So I'm bummed that we didn't get to do that, but it's so refreshing to have young femme voices and good femme voices at that.
She's incredible.
I mean, and it's just like, I want to support that, and like, I want to, offer whatever I can, whatever that is, album artwork or whatever, like anything, just to like, again, elevate. Like if we all are growing at the same time, like I can't imagine what this place is going to be like 5-10 years,
Well, and looking at like what is an easy favor for you to do for somebody that you want to see succeed, rather than like specifically say you charge however much per hour. When you see somebody that it's like, okay, Nalia for one is really young, right? She's super young,
Right.
super new to everything, but is incredibly talented.
Right.
I want my name attached to her because I know she's going to be she's going to do really, really well, and it's going to be awesome. So right now, if there's anything that I can do, which there has been, like I've had her like be at some events of mine, and like she was a guest on my show. If I'm in a position where I can relatively easily do something to boost her, I'm gonna do that. Maybe I'm not gonna go incredibly far out of my way, but if there's something that's like right in front of me that is like, oh, well, I can help this person, well, then maybe they'll be able to do something like that for me later on at some point. Who knows? But yeah, you guys should collaborate on something because she's awesome. I really would like to see, I don't know if they've done this recently now or not, but since the whole COVID thing, obviously like no one's playing shows, right? But like if we were able to have the protests over at the band shell in Owen Park, why can't we have a show there? I was talking to TYB about that, and I'm like, why can't we do that? Everyone could wear masks.
You can.
Yeah, but I know we can, but it's more like, why hasn't that happened? Because we're all starving for a show right now. You could definitely do like a super dope benefit for literally anything you want, or even just not have any like finances involved.
Yeah.
Should definitely do one there. I'm down to donate a little something or whatever to make it happen.
It's so weird because it's like, I mean, no, like COVID is just like whatever. Nobody freaking knows. And obviously, assembling is different than a concert, and I get that. But you would think, if it's outside. I don't know.
Outside, mask, you could socially distance.
Right.
I'm just saying, I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
And right now, like one thing, and the problem is like, it's obviously a touchy subject to talk about COVID because no one really knows. Everyone has all these different feelings, right? So whatever you say, some people are going to dislike it. And you're right. Like, assembling for a cause versus assembling for, a concert. Well, one thing I talked to you about off mic is mental health is something that's really, really, really important to me. And I've gone through like a really difficult time frame in my life in the last like year and a half. And man, like this, I think that's something people are overlooking is how this quarantine is really affecting people's mental health.
Right.
Like that is going to have very long-term effects. And it's not to discount like trying to stay healthy, physically speaking, but it's about looking at everything that's involved. And if something like that can bring people together while still doing it safely and uplift people's spirits, especially because like Nolly and TYB specifically spread very positive music, you know what I mean? Like that in itself does have value, you know what I mean? It does bring up people's health in just like a different way.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, like for artists in general, it's like live streaming only feels authentic to a degree.
Yeah, it's been tough. I've watched some of the live stream shows and I appreciate, what like West Korea's done with like Barnacle and everything. Like it's been cool. I've tuned into some of them. It's been cool. But it obviously isn't, the same, especially as for like what all of us are used to because we're all kind of part of like that community. So talking about that community, I think one thing that was cool, I don't know if they're ever going to do it again or what the whole spiel is at this point with Eau Claire's Fest, but in general, right, Justin Vernon has his thing. It was Eau Claire's Fest, which was like pretty tight. Well, there's actually kind of a lot of businesses that have their own thing, that's once a year, even as like, no offense to anyone that loves it, but stupid Pickle Fest, right? Like they have their thing and whatever. And I have a lot of events that I do every year. If you guys had to have like one event that Eau Claire knew was like Odd Humyns thing, what would it be?
Well, we have a thing, and it's called Palentines, and it's like the Saturday following actual Valentine's, and it's just a celebration of pals, like friend love, or real love or whatever. But we like this past February, God, it feels like a year ago, but we had one here, and we had like face painting, and we had a bunch of vendors come in, and we had a little concert at night, and it was just a pure celebration of like genuine love. And like it's a little bit more than, you know, what I'm talking about, but just the idea of like celebrating friends. And that's what we've been, I think the first one we had was at Brooks Studio, Com Studios. And that was really cool. We had like Daughter's Books pop up, and we had like a poetry reading or something, and it was really, really sweet. So yeah, that's our one thing that we have, but.
That actually makes a lot of sense, obviously. You know, it's your business. I think that's one thing that really sucks. Like, we're a fairly accepting town, at least it like seems from my point of view. Granted, my point of view is way different from like your point of view. But spreading the idea that love is obviously extremely important. I was the best man / officiant in a lesbian wedding several years ago. And at the time anyways, one of them, her family wouldn't give up her birth certificate so she could get married. Which is like kind of insane in today's society that like there's still that much prejudice, you know, and a lot of it's just like behind closed doors, I think, at this point.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
One thing that really sucks is right now, you know, all of a sudden I'm back in the dating world because I'm single, and like I've had women talk to me like, oh, well, you shouldn't hang out with other women and you shouldn't do this or whatever. And it's like, well, I actually have a lot of female friends, though. Like, there shouldn't be like a weird stigma to be like a man and a woman can't hang out with just being friends because there's queer people, right? Like, what are you going to say? Like, I can't hang out with women I'm not dating? Like, obviously not. But I think it's because of the weird perception that that's what relationships need to be. And realistically, they don't. You don't have to be dating somebody to bring them flowers and say, have a great day. You know what I mean? And we should be able to celebrate that.
And that's totally like what it is. You know, it's like understanding that, and even between two straight dudes, like you should absolutely tell your friends you love them, and that, you know, Palentines is just a day to celebrate that. So.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. Well, so moving forward, like for my overarching goal for my shop is kind of what I did now. Like, I kind of just wanted to keep kicking it, doing what we're doing. Obviously, getting back to what we were doing when quarantine eventually is gone. Right now, there's a million problems affecting every little business. I can't get merchandise, which is like insane. But I want to, as long as I get back to where I was even a year ago of like, I had a really solid inventory, throw a bunch of events all summer long. It's kind of grown to like what I think it should be in Eau Claire for a skateboard shop. So I'm kind of there. And now I'm like working on all kinds of other stuff. You guys are way newer, you know, you're much more in the beginning of the business. Things are still evolving quite a bit. Where do you kind of see your overarching goal for this particular store, like, being? What would you like it to become?
I think just offering more like queerness, offering more diversity in products, highlighting Black makers, highlighting Indigenous or folks of color makers. And also like the Salon is something that's near and dear to my heart, obviously, because I'm a musician, but having a queer femme run venue is like, that was my always dream. Like, that was something that I've always wanted to do. And it's just unfortunate that it's, you know, kind of got cut short. And like, this is our second summer being in business. And we're prime location right across from the farmer's market, like, or, you know, sounds like summer on Thursday nights, and all of that has just kind of put a damper in things. But outside of that, I think just continuing to push our mission and continuing to just highlight other voices that are maybe not the norm here.
It's fun when all of a sudden you're in a position to kind of like create whatever.
Yeah.
You know, like if all of a sudden you had a few different people reach out and be like, hey, you want to do like a poetry event? I'm sure you'd be like,
okay.
Yeah.
We had one here.
Did you? Yeah, there you go. Like, or whatever, like any kind of different event. All of a sudden you're in a position where you own a venue where you can kind of do whatever the hell you want to do, which is really tight, because then there's no limitations, and you can kind of like, just because it's been focused on shows or whatever for a certain period of time doesn't mean you can't do a creative workshop or like.
Well, we had like a film screening down there one night. We've had poetry readings up here. We've had a good number of different events, but it was just like, it's only been almost 2 years, not even. So it's been like just not a lot of time that we've been able to get our footing. But I'm excited. I'm excited to like get past this collectively and see what we can do. But yeah.
Okay, so I usually like to ask this on every episode. I share like all kinds of experiences, which is awesome, you know. But I also like, I'm kind of running out of them because I've been doing so many episodes. I don't know what episode this is at this point. But I always like to ask, can you please share an experience that you got to have that you're really thankful happened, but it only happened because you chose to pursue what you're doing, in this case, like your whole business front?
I will say I think it was like one of the first weeks we were open. I was in the shop by myself, and I had a young girl come in, or a young human come in, and her face just kind of like lit up as soon as she walked in, or they walked in, and they were just talking about how they were an artist, and I'm also Wiccan, and so she was talking to me about that, and she must have been like in high school or freshman or in 8th grade or something. But then they ran back to their car and grabbed their sketchbook and came back and like walked me through their entire sketchbook, and it was beautiful and wonderful. And then, we kept talking about everything, and she said, my grandma's in the car. I don't think she'd like coming in here because it's a little weird, but I love it in here. And it was just, and she was like, I think she went to Memorial, so she must have been in high school. She went to Memorial. And it was just the moment that I knew that what I was doing was right was when I had that conversation, because that young human was me when I was in high school. Like, I just was searching so hard for a place like this. I was searching so hard to be heard and seen, to feel respected and to feel ownership of myself, and to just like have that conversation with them and hear them talk about their own practice was like, oh my God, like this is why I'm doing it, for young folks like that. Yeah, it was pretty life-changing.
Yeah. Well, and people want to feel accepted, you know what I mean? And beyond accepted, they want to feel respected.
Absolutely.
And they want to feel like what they're doing is worth their time.
Yep.
And when you're in like a smaller community, skateboarding as well, on a lesser scale, obviously, especially now, because skateboarding is like the trendy, cool thing at this point. But in general, like, I didn't grow up as like the jock kid. I wasn't like one of the cool, popular kids in that way. Not that I like didn't get along with people fine, but like what I was doing wasn't something anyone respected. Like nobody was like proud of me for skateboarding.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which sucks, because you should be proud of kids for doing art and doing poetry and all that type of thing. And I said,
or
I
anything
think,
that they're passionate about.
Yeah, whatever they enjoy doing. As long as they're not hurting anybody, then by all means, like be your best version of yourself.
Absolutely.
And your best version of yourself is the happiest version of yourself, right? So whatever makes you happy, we should all be trying to support that. So it's cool, again, being able to have a place where that's what you're doing for people, is like really giving that validation of, hey, what you're doing is important. You should keep doing that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So challenges happen all the time, obviously, right? This is like a pretty big one. But what do you think was one of the bigger challenges that you've had, and what lesson did you learn that you think was, really beneficial to you from it?
I've talked to a few other business owners about this, but like we all start these things because we're passionate about them. What we don't really consider, or maybe when you start a thing like this, what you don't maybe really think about is the legalities and the logistics behind it. So starting a small business sounds awesome on paper and in theory, but then when you actually start to do it, there's a lot of things that you have to learn, like taxes and budgeting and things that maybe people aren't as aware of. But when you're forced to do it, you learn very quickly. So that's been one of the biggest challenges, but also something that's taught me that, hey, I'm not completely stupid. Like, hey, I'm a little bit capable of having a passion and also like taking care of it. But yeah, it's interesting because you start these things and you're like, oh yeah, wait, I have to pay rent, or like, oh yeah, wait, I have to like, pay my business insurance and like stuff like that a lot of people might not think about, but you're totally capable of doing it. It's just a matter of like kind of, learning.
I think a lot of people put themselves into boxes based on like their past experiences and say, well, this is the person that I am. And that is one really cool thing for people who end up being successful at business. Some people who open their own businesses, they, for whatever reason, they just can't do it. But for a lot of people, it shows you real quick that you're not going to be an accountant necessarily, but you don't have to be
Absolutely.
that, And when you get put in a position where you have to handle everything, which you do as a small business owner, because you can't afford to outsource all this stuff till you get more established and have more revenue coming through. But all of a sudden, you're put in a position where it's like, well, I have to take care of everything, so I'm just going to take care of everything. And I think it's a really empowering thing because then it teaches you, well, I mean, if I could do this, I could probably do the majority of what other people do, right? Totally. I mean, it put me in a position where the first time I traveled internationally, right, I went to Japan. And that was after I'd opened my store. And I don't know if I would have gone before that because I've never traveled before. I'd rarely even traveled within the country, without like somebody else showing me what I'm doing. Yeah. But during that time frame, I had learned so much about myself of well, if I can just like handle things as they come, just don't lose my head about it, I'll be all right.
Right.
Like I'm a smart enough person.
Yeah.
I can always just Google it and figure it
Right.
out, And I think unless you're purposely like being deceitful with like taxes or something.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
As long as you're being straightforward and just like doing what you can.
Yeah.
People aren't trying to penalize you
No.
for like trying.
Right.
They're aware that there's many people that own small businesses
Yep.
that are just creative types that don't really
Totally.
know. Like you'll figure it out as long as you have any kind of like belief in yourself and any kind of drive to do it.
Right.
So do you have any last words for our friends on this episode before we have the outro song?
I would say just jump in. Just do the thing that you want to do. Do the things that make you happy. Don't wait around for somebody to give you permission or, anything like that, because this is a very short time that we have. So just do the things that make you happy while you're here.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Passion Pod. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. We'll see you soon.